Thank you, Don. Can you guys hear me? Everyone, is this loud enough? So, yeah, my attendance isn't great, but I hope I can entertain you guys, as much as I can. So yeah, I'm talking about building cool shit with Bitbucket's REST API. So, yeah, I'm a Confluence developer, so this is kind of like been my pet project for a while now. And I kind of like to get my hands dirty with a bit of everything. So I like, testing, building software, designing stuff, and whatever a dude with binary on his shirt does. I'm sure I like doing that too. So what's really good about working at Atlassian is we get this 20% time stuff where I can kind of explore all these aspects and get to play around with some cool ideas and that kind of shit. But the problem with 20% time is that you run out of 20% time, right? It's only 20% of your time. So you need to be really good at managing your time, but you also need your tools to help you out as much as you can, because there's just, you need to go fast. You need to utilize your time. And the problem with our products is that they generally have a pretty big ramp-up time when you want to go and work on them in your 20% time. So it's like, getting your head around a code base, getting your head around their processes, all that kind of stuff. It's just painful. So what you end up doing most of the time is fixing these little bugs, squashing bugs, basically. And that's not really what you want to do in 20% time. You want to be changing the world, developing all this awesome software, that kind of thing. And the answer to that is our REST API. So all of our products have really cool REST APIs, but in particular, I'm obviously talking about Bitbucket's one, and what I've done with it, and what it has enabled me to do. And what I've built is this Bitbucket cards thing. So Bitbucket has an issue tracker, and it's just like this super simple issue tracker, and I've slapped this nice drag and drop issue card wall thing on top of it. And this is all through the REST API, so I'm just going to talk about how I built this, the technologies I use, what you guys can use if you want to do something similar, and why it's just a really good idea to use Bitbucket's REST API. So let's take a look at Bitbucket's issue tracker as it currently stands. It is like the simplest issue tracker you will ever see in your life. It's a super simple communication medium, and that's really cool, and I really love it. I'm a big fan, but it could use a little bit of love, because it's just not the most effective way to communicate, right? You might have to click around a bit too much if you want to move issues. It's not its optimal state, and things can break down pretty easily. So this is what it currently looks like, and this is kind of like what every issue tracker at some point looked like, a big list of all your issues. You get the titles down the side, you've got issue state and that kind of thing, who's responsible. You can kind of filter those if you like. So here I've got a open filter on, so I only see the issues that are open, and you can also build more custom queries if you like. Then, as you'd expect to be able to do, you can create a new issue, all the kind of stuff you'd expect there, an assignee, a type, priority, component. It's all there. There's a lot of building blocks to work with. It's just not, the UX needs a bit of work, right? And, oh, sorry, one more thing is the version, which is quite important to the iteration management with the cardboard stuff when we get there. So I'll talk about that a bit later. The point is that all this stuff is there, and we have these nice REST endpoints that give us access to all this data. We can post to them, we can fetch stuff out as you'd want to do if you're going to build on top of it. And this is kind of what I was going for. So I really like physical card walls. I like when your team is actually up there, moving stuff around, talking to stuff at a board. Doesn't always work for distributed kind of environments. So that's why we have these card walls, right? And this one's actually pretty cool, because it's when I was looking for a picture of one of these card walls, the first one that came up that was actually any good, which is this one, was from a totally non-technical realm. The person running this is a blog editor, and it seems to be a blog about underpants and bras and weird shit like that. So I think it's funny that it's escaped the technical world, and now it's kind of this mainstream idea, which is really cool. So yeah, so Bitbucket cards. This is what I've built. This is the kind of landing page when you get there, and the first thing you're going to want to do is log in via Bitbucket. And so what this is interacting with Bitbucket's OAuth endpoint. So when you click that button, you get taken into Bitbucket, and it says, hey, look, this app is trying to request access. Do you want to grant access to this from this app to your Bitbucket profile, and that kicks off this OAuth dance. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with OAuth, but this is a quick kind of overview. So when a user clicks login, they kind of send off this request and say, hey, I've got a user trying to log into Bitbucket. Can we kick off this dance with this request token? Sends it back and says, hey. Now we say, hey, can you authenticate them for me? They do the authentication dance, where you sell that grant access button, and then you get back this access token at the end of it all, which allows you to make these authenticated REST calls and pipe them through a server side and get all your information from your user, basically. So once all that's happened, you get dumped back into the dashboard. So this is like the main screen when you first land here, and you can see a couple of things here. So create a project. There's REST endpoints for posting to create and poll projects. You've got user information, so you can get their avatar, their username, and that kind of stuff. And then also all this is a list of the repos that this user is following, that I'm following. So you can see a bit of metadata about all these things. And if I want to click down into one of these things, one of these projects, this happens to be the Bitbucket public issue tracker. You can see I'm polling like an issues endpoint here, where I get all the information about all the issues attached to a project. This is a version drop-down, so you can poll all the versions. There's like access to a lot of information here, and we're grouping them based on the properties of each issue. So, for example, with the default columns here, we've got on hold, in progress, and resolved. We can configure those to collect issues that have like in progress. If its issue state is open, then everything in progress has a state of open, basically. So if I want to add a new column, this is what I get, and these are all the different properties you can filter by, and the different options, the different values you can set, and you can also prompt for values that get posted back when you drop an issue into a column. Every time you do a drop, it's sending off REST requests, basically. And editing a column, same kind of deal. And then you can drag and drop them. Ooh, that screenshot didn't come out quite right, but you can drag and drop all the columns around and that kind of stuff. So similarly with the website, you can create an issue just as you would there, all the same kind of options. The only thing you really need is a title, so this could be streamlined a little bit to make it a nice user experience. But yeah, that's what it currently looks like. And then once you've created your issues in your columns, you can drag them around, and as you drag and drop, the properties that you've set up for each column, like in progress, is set to state equals open, so when you drop an issue in there, it'll post that back to the REST endpoint. So all the data is just basically flowing through my app, and it's all stored on Bitbucket. There's no real extra storage that I've got here. It's just a new interface, which is pretty cool. So then you can open up an issue if you can't manage to edit an issue just by dragging and dropping. Yeah, you can set individual fields here, and you can see all the comments. So again, this is another endpoint, a comments endpoint, where you just poll, push, and get all the comments attached to an issue, and then you can post back to it to actually update and add another one. So yeah, it's a pretty complete endpoint set of REST endpoints in terms of the issue tracker. It's pretty cool. And this is one that we kind of added in the process of developing this. So polling for versions, which is kind of how you can manage your iterations with Bitbucket cards. So if you say have a version for each iteration, each week or fortnight or whatever they might be, once you've finished off an iteration, you can create a new one, that kind of thing, a new version, and that's how you do it, basically. And if you want to drag issues into those versions, you drag and drop through that select box up the top. And yeah, so you get prompted for which version you want to drop it into. The last thing, which is pretty cool, is doing that actual release process. So if you decide you finish this iteration and you want to kind of move all the issues that haven't been resolved into your next iteration and create that new version for it and all that kind of stuff, this dialog kind of streamlines that. I'd also really like to be able to do things like run build scripts or deployments or something from here. So like if we had a Heroku kind of hook in there somewhere, we could do a git push and deploy to Heroku Live from here, which would be pretty sweet. So yeah, so building it, just kind of a bit about the technologies that I used. other than the REST API. So Heroku, obviously, it's a pretty cool hosting service. So you can just kind of push your repository out to Heroku, and if it's a web app in the right format, it'll run it for you. Bootstrap is Twitter's UI, kind of CSS and JavaScript stuff, which is pretty sweet. It lets you get something looking pretty nice and is still reasonably customizable up and running really quickly. It's pretty good. And jQuery, we're kind of a big jQuery shop at Atlassian, so that's just kind of the tool of choice. But the more interesting one on top of that is Bitbucket JS, which is what one of the Bitbucket guys is working on in his 20% time, or FedEx, I think. And it's kind of a JavaScript wrapper around the REST API, so it just makes it a lot easier to get access to all the information, right? So this is an example of one of those functions that you can get. So here we're polling for a repository, or we've got a repository object. We give it the username and the slug, and then once we get that back, we can call various functions on it to poll different REST endpoints. So issues is going to call out to the issues endpoint, and we can do various searches or filters, and then we provide a callback for what happens when we get our data back. And this thing is pretty cool. Unfortunately, it wasn't ready when I pretty much finished my first cut of cards. I'm working on getting it in there now, so I haven't used it in anger. But there's a whole lot that you can do with it, right? There's getting it details, branches, change sets, files, and directories and stuff off repository objects. And there are objects for all the other different endpoints out there, so it's a pretty complete thing, and it's pretty awesome. On the server side of things, I use Flask, so I'm a pretty big Python guy, and this is just kind of like if you know Sinatra for Ruby or something like that. It's a similar kind of framework, just a super lightweight web framework for Python, and this is pretty much the core of my server side. Is all it's doing really is proxying requests through an OAuth session. So you specify a path that you want to a URL you want to route to, and the various methods that it takes, and you just kind of build up your query get content back and spit out the JSON that Bitbucket gives you. So it's all pretty simple, and it's a pretty cool way to do web development. But yeah, these are the other options if you guys are Ruby guys or total hipster Node.js guys. These are the options. So why REST rocks, and in particular, I guess this is about why Bitbucket's REST API rocks. It's all about dev speed for me. So this thing was like 10 of my 20% days, and I managed to get this pretty much up and running in that time with some evenings when I was feeling passionate about it. So it just enables you to build stuff so much quicker when you don't have to dig into either the actual product code or even writing Java and stuff for a lot of our Atlassian plugins. You get away from the technology stack. So while I'm a big fan of Django as well and Python, and in this case, it wouldn't have been that bad. If I wanted to get away from any other particular stack, it makes life much, much easier, and it just kind of speeds you up again. And similarly with the bureaucracy, I get away from everyone else's constraints and time constraints and that kind of stuff. We were able to launch this thing really quickly, so it was about 3 months or so, I think, from initial cut to launch. So working with these tools, it's just an awesome way to get something out there quickly, get something out there and see if people actually like it or not, and that's the best way to decide whether or not this is something we're going to continue working on. It just enables this super awesome, fast development process, and it provides you with an awesome platform for building stuff like not having to manage user registration and doing everything through OAuth and with Bitbucket accounts. That was it's an awesome user experience. Just that they can do one-click sign-in. Yeah, it's a great way to develop. And these are some of the other things that we've done on top of that platform. So like for one of our FedExes, we did a kind of command line utility. So there's like some examples of other stuff that are out there where you can poll for the repositories you have access to, or create repositories from the command line, or get awesome ASCII art versions of people's avatars in your terminal. Other people are doing more serious things with that. So Cloud9 have integration with their web-based IDE, so you can clone and fetch repositories from within your browser make your modifications, do your work, do your changes, push back to it, all that kind of stuff, which is pretty awesome. Stack Overflow, on their careers site, they have a kind of digital resume that they build up, and as part of that, they're polling Bitbucket repositories and the work you've done and all that kind of stuff. And App Harbor, kind of similar to Heroku, they do deployments for .NET applications and stuff like that. And they have some pretty cool hooks into Bitbucket, and so when you commit, you can push straight out to App Harbor and stuff like that. So yeah, so this is the future. This is kind of like the future as I want it to be. I don't know if this is actually going to be the future, but remote apps is something you guys have heard a lot about at Summit, and one of the other Bitbucket developers has been working on a remote apps concept in his 20% time, and I think that's a really awesome idea. I think embedding your external application inside Bitbucket and keeping all the context is a really good idea. And this is kind of how you do it. So we have like this is in its current state. You define your plugin with an XML descriptor, and you kind of give it all the standard info you'd expect, your name, developer, and then you provide a point where you want your plugin to work. So we want to see a link to a card wall in the repo tab, and we want it to render content in an iframe from bitbucketcards.com. So this would basically stick my app inside Bitbucket. And while this isn't like, I've skinned mine to look a lot like Bitbucket, so I had to point this out, but you have the Bitbucket header up the top there. You don't lose context, you stay within the app, but you still get the new features and stuff like that. Some terrible examples that I've like hacked up in Fireworks. This is Cloud9's editor, so if you can imagine this actually working, where you're browsing through your source repository and you want to edit a file in line, you just kind of click through, edit your stuff, hit save, push back to it, and you're never leaving Bitbucket there. And similarly, like I was talking about before, with having some kind of deploy thing with Heroku, maybe more customized than just Heroku, but for me, this is exactly what I kind of wanted, where I can release from within Bitbucket, maybe have this menu where I could see what state my Heroku repository was in compared to my Bitbucket one, that kind of thing. I think these would be some cool ideas, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about those. And in an attempt to get you guys excited about those, we're talking about Code Guys this year. There's 46 days, $45,000 prizes, so I would really love to see some extensions to Bitbucket in there based on its REST API, because you can get something done something really awesome done really quickly, and I think it's totally worth the time, and I would love to see it. So yeah, there are a lot of other REST endpoints that I haven't talked about. If you have any ideas about any of these or want to talk to me about them or anything like that, I would love to hear from you and love to have a chat with you. So yeah, thank you. Any questions, guys? Cheers.